This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, NIL Game Changers, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Oh, it's game week. Great to be with you. Show being brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drink, snacks. Roasted peanuts fresh and out every day. Pickle bar led by the barrels and the dills. Indeed, second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Stock up for the Labor Day weekend. And the first big weekend of college football. Todd, hello to you. And I guess we have George Von Benko today, talking about Dick LeBeau and the Steelers' 2008 defense, and then Tony Caridi, the voice of West Virginia football.
That is correct. Hopefully.
I know it's
right?
correct. That's why I said it. No, it's always hope. So high school football week one, your thoughts, takeaways?
Ooh. Well, I think some people were a little surprised with how bad it went for Southern on Saturday, at least at the beginning. I wouldn't read a lot into that. Wyomissing's pretty good, and I think Southern will be okay by the time we get to the season. Shikellamy Milton played a fun one on Friday night. I just finally watched most of it this morning. Went to overtime. There was a 99-yard quarterback sneak in it that Milton won. That was, and I was a little surprised that not that Lewisburg beat Lime Mountain, that they were able to move the ball as much as they were against the Lime Mountain defense. Jeremiah Davis ran for almost 150 yards for Lewisburg, and they played real well defensively against a veer option that you're not going to see much, the rest of the season. Shamokin was impressive against Pottsville. The first game I was at, that Selinsgrove defense is going to be pretty good. They beat Juniata 14-6. Offense left a little bit to be desired. They scored in their first drive and then didn't score again until about 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter when it was 7-6. So, they're going to have to figure out some things there, and they get a state. They're heading on the road for a state-ranked team. They're heading down the Twin Valley on Friday night, so that should be an interesting matchup for them.
And Selinsgrove survived against Juniata.
Yes. Yeah, the Juniata kid, I think I talked a little bit about him when we were talking last week, Jasper Sheps. He had 10 catches for about 88 yards, but the big thing for them was they didn't let him break away and get any big plays. If he caught the ball, they kept him in front of him and made sure that he didn't break away and make any long plays.
Let's see. By my count of the games that we have scores on, that we put on our WKOK scoreboard, only 4 were routes. Everything else was a good game.
Yeah.
South Williamsport won by 13 over Athens. Shamokin beat Pottsville by 13. Jersey Shore beat Dallas by 7. We know Dallas is a good program. North Schuylkill beat Mount Carmel by 7. Warrior Run beat Muncie by 7. Loyalsock beat Mifflinburg by 1. Lewisburg won by 3, as you mentioned. Selinsgrove won by 8, and Shikellamy and Milton went overtime, and Milton won.
Yeah, I at least for the first week, I feel like I was a little bit right that there was a little more parity this season.
No, you're all over. Now, Selinsgrove's at Twin Valley, and Lewisburg's at Shikellamy. So we've got that going on. Hamburg, Midwest, Newport, Lime Mountain, Williamsport, Hazleton. Del Valley is at Jersey Shore. Wellsboro, Muncie. Interesting game. Central Mountain and Bloomsburg.
Del Valley to Jersey Shore is not a short trip, nor is it a straight line.
No, I believe Delaware Valley's coach is Keith Olsemer, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, the former Nittany Lion. I've talked to Keith a couple of times when he's been at practice over the years.
His son is a senior quarterback for them, actually.
Yeah. So there you go. Opening week high school football in the books. All right, now let's get to the opening games. And if you're wondering why ESPN and how they cover things just sometimes just drives me nuts. The Georgia Tech Florida State game is absolutely under that category. I'm watching it, and it's not as if they're not doing a good job of breaking the game down and things like that. That's fine. But at the end of the game, Georgia Tech wins. Now, quickly, why did Georgia Tech win? Georgia Tech ran the football and ran it really well, which meant they were able to put together some time-consuming drives, and they shortened the game. And they kept the Florida State offense, not just off the field, but they also kept the number of possessions in the game down. When you can minimize possessions and be effective, okay, you've got something at that point. And that's what Georgia Tech did. They shortened the game, and they were effective with it. But at the end of the game, you know, they're going through Georgia Tech. They haven't beaten a top 10 team, blah, blah, blah. They haven't, blah, 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 blah. And Florida State's won X amount in a row in the ACC, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we did all the pregame blah, blah, blah stuff at the end of the game. Okay. What didn't they do? Okay. They didn't point out that in this 12-team playoff, and I'm talking about the guys in Ireland. Okay, I'm sure I didn't watch the studio thing, so I think at some point maybe they mentioned this. The loss for Florida State, considered to be a contender for the 12-team playoff, wasn't just a loss. It was a conference loss. And if you're Florida State or anybody else in the ACC, you don't want to be in the at-large pool, because then your options are limited in the at-large pool. If you're in the Big Ten or the ACC or the SEC, you have more options in the at-large pool. Everybody knows it. Everybody does. So that wasn't just a loss. It was a conference loss for a team that might need to win the conference. Doesn't mean they can't get to the conference championship game. They certainly can. All right? But here's the other part. You're in the ACC. You have fewer games left to play now. You only have 7 games left in the conference to make up for it. You're not a 9-game conference. You're an 8-game conference. There's a lot here to unpack about what happened on Saturday. And for Florida State, that put them not just at an initial disadvantage nationally, but to put them in an initial disadvantage in the conference, because the ACC might be one of those conferences where you need to win it to get in it. And these are all things that to me were important factors. That my first thought, the field goal goes through, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, 12-team playoff era, these guys were counting on being there. Doesn't mean they can't go out and win the next 11 games. They certainly can. But they're going to have to get themselves back in a position to get themselves to the ACC title game, and they can't, in other words, the pressure to not stumble again. Okay? There's going to be a pressure not to stumble again, and they can't afford to stumble again in the conference. And that's the part that I don't understand why that wasn't discussed.
They essentially don't control their own destiny anymore.
That's right.
They're going to need somebody else to beat Clemson besides them now.
Or North Carolina or somebody. I mean, in other words, there are other people that they're going to have to go out. First of all, they have to take care of their own business. Now, if they finish second in the ACC, they'll get to the championship game. And if they win it, they get the bid. Okay. All right, I got it. But what if they stumble one other time, get to the championship game, and lose it? Uh-oh. Now you get 3 losses. Does the ACC at that point get a second bid? I'm not so sure. We'll have to see how the season plays out. But to be sitting there, and of course there's all the joy and happiness and the whole thing. What Georgia Tech did was great. How they did it was impressive. I was not surprised the game went to the fourth quarter because I think Georgia Tech has really improved. I mean, it really has improved, without question. But Florida State was the national story going into the game. Okay. Well, in the national story going into the game, it's a multi-tiered story of Florida State, what happened to them last year, 12-team playoff, road from the ACC, the whole thing. They talked about they got none of that. Right? Really? There's a lot of yelling at the end, but no substance. I mean, that's what made that loss, even though it's Clemson plays Georgia this week, okay? If Georgia wins, and they're the favorite, Clemson now would have to overcome a loss. But they're still 0-0 in the ACC. They still have multiple pathways to getting there, including their own conference. A loss would be a non-conference loss to obviously a quality opponent. But it'll be a non-conference loss as opposed to Florida State's loss, which means they're 0-1 now, not just overall, but in the league. And that's what made it a little bit bigger, especially for a league that is going to struggle to get multiple bids. How about that? That's how I looked at it. All right, okay, come on, guys. Get to, the significance of not just, jumping up and down for Georgia Tech and a field goal and the whole thing. I got it. But for Florida State, on 2 different fronts now, 2 different fronts, okay? They're going to have to be almost perfect on 2 different fronts. With every ACC game they play, can't afford a second loss. And overall, can they afford a second loss?
And if Clemson plays Georgia fairly tight and still loses, I think in people's minds, that's probably better for Clemson than that loss is for Florida State. That automatically would put in people's minds that Clemson's probably better than them too.
Especially with the game being in Atlanta.
Yes.
The game's going to be played at Mercedes-Benz. Remember, it was, I don't know, 3-4 years ago? DJ was the quarterback. And it ended up being a really good game. Low scoring. I think Georgia won the game 10-3. And that was a real battle. He kind of walked out of, I kind of turned off the TV that night and thought, well, I'll tell you right now, Georgia's really good. But you know what? Clemson's pretty good, too. That was quite a game. The worst thing that could happen to Clemson from a confidence point of view is if Georgia goes out and schools them. Uh-oh. Especially after going 4-4 in the ACC last year. And I know it's a non-conference game, but it tells you that where Clemson was last year. If they're 4-4 in the ACC, this is a big confidence game for them. And if they can go head-to-head with Georgia in Atlanta, and you just go toe-to-toe, that'd be great for Clemson. If they win the game, it's phenomenal. If they get blown out, say that it happens to be whatever the circumstance, say they get blown out, man, that's got to be a confidence blow after what happened last year.
And it's kind of opening up for, I saw a lot of people in the preseason talking about Virginia Tech being a dark horse. Mm-hmm. This keeps that keeps that hope alive before they've even played a game as well.
Right. And again, I go back to Florida State. It wasn't just a loss. It was a conference loss, and we don't know, and it's all guesswork in August about how many teams could get in based on strength of schedule. But, I mean, does the ACC get a second team? I don't know. We'll see how the schedule plays out. There's going to be a lot of people tooting the horn of the SEC. That loss was on multiple fronts, and that didn't make the cut of the broadcast.
I mean, with the depth of both conferences, I can't believe that, the Big Ten and the SEC are not going to have massive strength of schedule advantages over the ACC.
Right. No, see, that's going to be a problem. Now, this makes somebody said, well, the regular season doesn't have the same because of the 12-team playoff. It's the other way around. To me, the regular season's got more juice to it now than ever because you got everybody jockeying for positions. People, and Florida State lost the game on two fronts. They're not dead, not by a wild margin, but, okay, that means they're going to have to really, really be good. In other words, their margin of error on both fronts decreased dramatically because of that loss. So their margin of error, that's the issue. It's the margin of error that they have. I mean, they're going to have to go out. They can't stumble again. And that's the significance of it. And see, we're gonna be talking about this stuff every week. In, out, non-con versus conference. It's college football is fun, exciting, and they don't play any games in Brazil.
Yet.
Yet. I know. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the NFL, I got to give the NFL credit. Nobody can open up the Brazilian market like they can. All right. Come back. More in a moment. George Von Benko next half hour. Dick LeBeau, 2008 defense, his book. Here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Great to have you with us on the show today, and this half hour being brought to you by NIL Game Changers, your ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness. Whether you're a business or athletes, these guys will get you rolling. Go to NILGameChangers.org. New book about the Pittsburgh Steelers, looking at the 2008 season in a team that gave up 223 points, led by coordinator Dick LeBeau. George Von Benko penned the book. George, welcome to the show.
Steve, great to be on with you. We're very excited about the book. It was released on July the 9th, and it is doing so well that Triumph Books has already committed to a second printing of the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. That's really great news. So let's start with this. Why did you pick this topic of Dick LeBeau and the 2008 Steelers defense?
Actually, he picked us.
Okay.
Dick had this on his mind for some time because he always believed that that 2008 Steeler defense never got its just due. He felt it was one of the great defenses in NFL history, and certainly the numbers back that up. So he had this on his mind for some time. He had accumulated a lot of information, all of the game films from all of those games, the 19 games from that season, all of the stats. And he started to look at writing the book, and he selected Scott Brown, who was a former beat writer covering the Steelers back then, and, of course, me, to co-author the book with him. He wanted it to be completely about the 2008 defense. We had to convince him a little bit that, yes, the bulk of the book will be about that season and that defense, but we can't overlook 59 years in the National Football League as a player and a coach. Steve, that will never, ever happen again. So we had to put some things about Dick LeBeau and his career in the book. He didn't want to do it, but finally acquiesced to our demands, and so there's some stuff on LeBeau and his career with the Lions and his time when he played for the Buckeyes at Ohio State. Some great sidebars on that. And, of course, the book about the 2008 Steelers, the 19 chapters are the 19 games of that season going into the final game, which was the Super Bowl.
What did you learn about Dick LeBeau, the man that you did not know before?
Well, he is just unbelievable in this respect. I've been around football a very, very long time. My first year covering the Steelers was actually Chuck Noll's first year, 1969. And in that period of being around, particularly pro football and college football an awful lot, I have never, ever met a coach as revered by his players as LeBeau was. It just came through, and I just couldn't believe the way they felt about him as a coach and as a person. Right on the cover of the book, there's a quote from James Farrier, who was his middle linebacker, and the quote was, "Unlike any coach I've ever met." And that struck me. But then when you dig deeper into LeBeau, people forget, Steve, what a great player he was in his own right.
That's right.
62 career interceptions, which is 7th or 8th still on the all-time interception list. And he was just a great, great player in his own right. And a lot of people don't know that. And then the stories that came out of Ohio State, the time he was at Ohio State was a great period, Steve. They won the national championship in '57, and there were great football players there. But he was in school with Jerry Lucas, John Havlicek, Larry Siegfried, Frank Howard, the baseball player, was a center on that team. Bobby Knight was on that team, and Knight and he became great friends. And then two other classmates of his that people didn't realize were Jack Nicklaus and Tom Weiskopf.
Yeah. No, I was over at We had the golf outing this year at Ohio State. I saw all that. It's like, okay, here's Nicholas's scorecard, right, under glass from the Masters in '86 in the final round. Like, okay, very nice.
Well, one of the funny stories of the sidebar is I interviewed Knight quite some time ago before he passed away, and Dick remained in contact with him till the end, even though he had deteriorated and had dementia. He called Bobby quite a bit, talked to him, but he told me the story about Knight, and it sort of tracks. Knight was always bugging LeBeau. He said, take me over, I want to visit with Coach Hayes. He always was bugging him to take him over to visit with Coach Hayes. And if you think about the two personalities, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, to a point. Sometimes you can butt heads with people if you have too similar personality. But sure, I mean, you also want to learn from people who are leaders. That's why you'll find coaches today, they'll read leadership books, and it's not just leadership books when it comes to other coaches. For example, Joe would read Churchill. He read Harry Truman. People like that. Those are some of the books he would read, Leaders Under Crisis, and how they handled it. So, yeah, I can completely understand that. James Harrison had a phenomenal year. As an undrafted player, he rises to the top of the defensive ladder. What, for Dick LeBeau, James Harrison to him meant what?
It meant fighting for a player that he believed in, because he was cut several times, and before he had that run when he really turned into the defensive player he was very close to being cut by the Steelers again, and LeBeau fought for him. And that's what, and to this day, Harrison still talks about that LeBeau believed in him, and he became the player he became. The interesting part of the book, too, when you look at all the players that contributed to the book, James Harrison and Troy Polamalu thought enough of it to write the foreword for the book.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which then brings us to Polamalu. Every defensive coordinator loves to have a chess piece that the opposition needs to find on every snap. To Dick LeBeau, what did Troy Polamalu mean to him?
He used him like a Swiss Army knife. He could do so many things. And you must remember, Troy was drafted the year before LeBeau came back to be the defensive coordinator. And many people in Pittsburgh viewed him as a bust. He had a very subpar rookie year, didn't get an awful lot of playing time. And Polamalu says to this day that it is no surprise to him that his career took off after Dick LeBeau became the defensive coordinator. And the thing that Polamalu impressed upon me is how much he put on his shoulders. Every player on that defense had to learn their role. Troy had to know what everybody else's role was. He said, not only did I have to know what I was supposed to do, I had to know what everybody else was supposed to do on that defense. And that's why Coach LeBeau spent so much time with me, and I was in the film room with him, and that gave him the leeway to do what he did, because a lot of times Troy would freelance, and LeBeau gave him that opportunity. Of course, it really helped, and it comes through in the book, that he had Ryan Clark back there to cover up if there were any mistakes made when he did gamble and see something and go to try and make a play. Ryan Clark was always in the right position, and LeBeau always told me, he says, it was so funny, I never saw them speak to each other on the field. They would just give each other a look. And a nod or just a look at each other, and they'd know what they were going to do. It was almost like it was telepathy between the two of them.
Well, if you ever talk with the legendary Harry Sinden, who was the coach of the Bruins, on Bobby Orr's famous goal where Noel Picard trips him and he flies through the air after scoring in overtime to win the Stanley Cup, Harry Sinden will tell you when Orr went to the net, the first thing he as a coach looked at was not Derek Sanderson passing it. he wanted to see if Eddie Westfall went back to the point to cover up for Orr not being there. Right? So that's how coaches think that way. Ryan Clark was back there to cover up for Troy Polamalu.
And more often than not, which drove the other teams crazy, Polamalu would guess right.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, no, because he has instincts.
Would guess right, and he would blow up the play or do something spectacular. He was just a great player, but that defense was filled with great players. And it all started up front. If you hear Dick talk, the defense would not have been able to do what they did had it not been for a great nose guard by the name of Casey Hampton, who just gummed things up in the middle of the other team's offense. It took sometimes 2 or 3 players to block Hampton.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the Patriots, Vince Wilfork. It's the same thing, right? You know, most great defenses are built up the middle. All right. Was that always Dick LeBeau's philosophy of building up the middle? Because it starts with Hampton, then it goes to Ferrier, then it goes back to the secondary?
Yes. And, of course, we can't overlook James Ferrier, who Dick felt never got the credit he deserved. He was like another coach on the field. Ferrier was just a great, great leader for that defense and did so many things. And then they had the 2 great outside linebackers in Harrison and then Lamar Woodley, who had come in and was actually in his rookie year of that year and did so much. But there were just so many great pieces to that defense, and Dick moved them around like chess pieces. But it was a pretty special bond between he and Polamalu. Polamalu, as Dick said, he used him like a Swiss Army knife.
What did Polamalu? You know, obviously Dick LeBeau meant a lot to his career, but as a man, what did Dick LeBeau mean to Troy Polamalu?
Well, you'll hear that from so many of the players. He taught them so much. And to a man, everybody I talked to from the defense, praised what he did as a coach and how they were put in a position to succeed by LeBeau. But they talked about the fact that it was more than just them as players. He cared about them as people and about their families. And, he was a father figure to many of the guys on that defense, and it continues to this day. We kicked off the book at the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum, the Heinz History Center. We had a Q&A session down there on a Sunday, July the 14th, with Coach LeBeau, Scott Brown, and I. And then we had 4 players who came to participate in the Q&A session with the fans: Casey Hampton, Brett Kiesel, Ike Taylor, and Chris Hoke. And it was just a marvelous get-together with the fans. Over 400 people showed up. But one of the things that happened late in the talk we had with the fans is a lady got up and said, "I've heard so much about you reciting the night before Christmas to your players around Christmas time." And she said, "Would you give us a snippet of that?" And Casey looks at me and says, "He's just going to do a little bit, right?" Dick got up and did the whole thing verbatim and brought the house down.
The Super Bowl win over Arizona ended up being a wild affair where the Steelers had 0 control over Larry Fitzgerald. Sorry, just a fact. But James Harrison had the 99-yard interception return, which took about 4.5 minutes to return. What does Dick recollect about that play at the end of the first half?
Harrison saw something. He was not supposed to be in that position, but he saw something, and he moved over to that position. Warner didn't see him, threw it right to him. But the interesting thing about the return was LeBeau had been on the defense that week in practice about if there is a turnover, you have to turn immediately and he stressed it time and time again, from a defensive player to an offensive player, and lay a hat on somebody and start blocking. And that was stressed in practice during the week. The players remembered it. In fact, they got to the point where everything that was a turnover in practice, they were running back all the way and never stopping. And that led to the return. Everybody got a hat on somebody except Deshae Townsend, who was on the other side of the defense and then finally caught up to the play. But one of the funny things is Ike Taylor was yelling for James to give him the ball. And James didn't give it. And Dick wanted him to get down. I was yelling at, we had the lead. We still had a 3-point lead. That was right at the end. I didn't want anything to happen and lose the ball again. I was telling James to get down, and instead he was running down the field, and finally I'm to the point where go, go, go. And, it turned out to be one of the greatest plays in NFL history. But it was Harrison who actually was not in the position he was supposed to be in. He saw something and moved into that position.
Yeah, it's one of the slowest plays in NFL history, but yeah, it's a great play. It's like, come on, let's go here.
He was completely out of gas when he got to the end zone.
Well, no, he got to the 30-yard line, his own 30-yard line. I went and got a sandwich, came back. When I got back, he was at the other 30. All right, so it just took a long time.
The other thing is, Dick, after they gave up the pass to Fitzgerald, which was a breakdown in the secondary, and Fitzgerald scored that touchdown, and the Cardinals had the lead. The defense had been so great all year, and Dick was fretting on the sidelines that we had played so well all year, and we're going to have a breakdown like that, and it's going to cost us the Super Bowl. And the byplay on the sidelines was the defense had really carried them all year, and Roethlisberger looked over and said, "Don't worry, I got this."
Yeah, because when they won Super Bowl 40, Roethlisberger was
and then
a caretaker
he down the
in
field
a lot of ways.
and then made that throw to Santonio Holmes to win the game. And then that's where the title comes from, paraphrasing. Mike Tomlin looked at LeBeau and the defense and said, "You guys have been great all year. Now is the time to rise up and stop Warner and Fitzgerald and them. You have a chance to be legendary." That's where the title came from.
Right. Well, I mean, look, Roethlisberger had been a caretaker really in Super Bowl 40. But in 43, I mean, the defense played well, but Roethlisberger's the difference maker in the game because he made big plays when they needed it. What did the defensive guys think of the offense for the Steelers and of Roethlisberger?
Well, at the beginning of the year, the offense was very much a work in progress. And Dick had told the defense that you've got to hold the fort until the offense catches up. And that's what they did, and they put up great in all the categories. Dick had a list of like 11 categories that he wanted them to rise to the occasion. These categories, they were better in each one of those categories except one, and they were very close to the number that he had. And the fact that in 9 defensive categories they led the league, they were second in one. But he felt the defense was going to have to carry the load early until the offense caught up, and eventually they got better and better as the year went on. And by the time they reached the Super Bowl, they were hitting on all cylinders at that point. But there was never any finger pointing. That never happened with Dick and his defense. That you played as one, and he made that clear to everybody. We play as a team.
Yeah, well, fortunately, Roethlisberger and Santonio Holmes were there to prove that point. So where can people get this book? Where are the outlets, and how can they order it?
You can order the book online at Amazon.com. It is in Barnes & Noble's bookstores all around the country and many different outlets. It's being sold on the Steelers website where they sell their merchandise. It's being sold at the Pro Football Hall of Fame website where they sell their merchandise. So there are plenty of outlets to pick up the book. And as I said, it's doing very, very well, and I'm just so pleased with the way it turned out. One of the things that helps Meg's books, too, is to have some good photographs in the book, and the Lions and the Steelers both gave us carte blanche for photos in the book, and there are some tremendous photos in the book.
George, congratulations on this. It's a tremendous project, and it sounds like it's a fascinating read that should be on a lot of tables. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, Steve. I really appreciate it.
George Von Benko wrote the book, and, of course, Dick LeBeau, Pittsburgh Steelers 2008 defense. This half hour brought to you by NIL Game Changers. Ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness opportunities. Go to nilgamechangers.org on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Sunbury Motors Hyundai is 43 new Hyundais away from their all-time sales record through August. With 134 new Hyundais to choose from, plus deep discounts and low interest rates, SMC is going to break this record. Sunbury Motors has 48 2024 Tucsons available, starting at $32,568, or get 1.99% financing for 60 months. Looking for the most versatile compact truck on the planet? Take up to $3,000 off the 2024 Santa Cruz. The Santa Cruz starts at $31,247, and there's 16 in stock. Here you go, car buyers. SMC has 11 2024 Elantras with 1.99% financing for 60 months, and Elantras start at just $22,960. If you want to have a fun day, you have to buy a Hyundai. We're breaking the record in August with 43 new Hyundai sold. Hurry in to Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.
You want your young athlete to get the most out of life and NIL. You need a roadmap, a strategic approach. NIL Game Changers help student athletes earn while they learn in their collegiate journey. Driven by former student athletes and coaches who work as NIL sports agents and content media designers, they'll guide both student and family, starting with high school students looking toward college and those already in college. Get a seasoned team of marketing experts with a background in athletics and coaching. Visit NILGameChangers.org, the ultimate destination for name, image, and likeness opportunities.
That was a great defense. They won the title that year. They went 12-4, the Steelers did. And I'm sure Steeler fans would love to get their hands on that book. And because Dick LeBeau is somebody who was a fixture in Pittsburgh. It's always hard to use the word genius with somebody. I know in the staff meeting, the suit has used it many times in reference to himself.
Should we tell him that you make me call you that off air?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Well, absolutely. Ah, boy.
No promos until you call me by the right name.
Yeah, that's me. A lot of yelling and screaming during the breaks. Dick Girardi and I always have this joke when we're waiting for a table someplace. Don't they know who we are? And we'll look at each other and go, yeah, that's probably one of the problems.